Hello everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another video at my YouTube channel. Today I'm using the Easy Repeat Colette tile background stamp. This came out a few months ago, and I'm going to be doing some watercoloring with this background stamp. I'm using Saunders Waterford watercolor paper. It's a very thick, luscious watercolor paper. It has been quite some time since I've used this watercolor paper, and it was time to break it out. So my idea behind this card design today was I wanted to show how you could take this Easy Repeat stamp and extend it over a larger piece of paper. So this watercolor paper is much larger than the card, and I'm going to first stamp the pattern kind of hanging off the bottom edge of the watercolor panel. So I'm going to be doing heat embossing eventually. So I've prepped it with an anti-static powder tool, and then I'm going to be stamping in a pigment ink. Now, there are a few reasons why I'm using this particular pigment ink, which is solid gold from Lisa Horton. The first reason is that pigment ink stays wet a long time. So it's perfect for embossing powder because you have time to apply that powder and have it stick to the ink. Another reason why I'm using gold pigment ink is because I'm eventually going to add gold embossing powder. So the same color, it's going to work to my advantage. And I'd like to use like a colored pigment ink for embossing because I can actually see where the stamped lines are. Now, if I had used a clear embossing ink, I wouldn't be able to tell if I had a nice solid stamped line. But because I used that gold pigment ink, I was able to stamp the pattern a couple of times and make sure that I had a really good stamped image. So I first applied some gilded embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. It's my favorite gold embossing powder. And then I hit that with my heat tool until all of those lines were melted. So now it's time to repeat that stamp a second time. So I've just moved the watercolor panel within my stamp wheel. And now I'm going to take that stamped image and position it off to the right of the pattern. Now, sometimes when you're doing easy repeat stamps, it works beautifully, it's seamless, you don't see where the edge of that stamp was. Unfortunately, as I was creating this card with my members here at YouTube, I was doing a members live, it did not go as planned. So you'll see here after I have all of the embossing done that you can see where the two patterns don't entirely line up. It's not a perfect pattern. So most of the time, if I'm creating like this and I want to show you how to do an easy repeat pattern, I would go ahead and just restamp this and be a little bit more careful. But since I was live with my members, I decided to just go with it. And I'm going to point out right here, you can see where that kind of seam is in between the two repeat stamped images. So instead of painting it all as one, I split it down into two different sections, and I'm going to be painting them in different ways. So I considered two different color palettes from this Sarah Renee Clark color cubes. I decided to go with 648. It's the color palette that my members chose. I did a little vote. So I'm going to use the same colors for both of these panels. And I spent a little bit of time mixing the ink colors, trying to get them to match that color inspiration. And then I'm going to go into all of the painting. So if you want to see that whole process of how I mixed all of those colors so they match, it's available to my YouTube members here at YouTube. Somewhere on the screen right now, around the video description, you'll probably see a button that is labeled Join. If you click on that button, you will then see additional information on how you can join my membership here at YouTube, and I'd love to have you. We have a lot of fun during those live streams. So for this first panel, I did a wet on wet technique where I wet the entire watercolor paper and then just dropped in color using a large paintbrush. So I'm going to kind of soften some of those edges, try to get everything kind of mixing and melding. And it looks really cool on top of that embossed line because it kind of has a container for each one of those colors. So for the second panel, I'm going to start out about the same, but I'm going to have this initial underlayer of color be a little bit on the lighter side. And that's because I'm going to go over each one of these sections with darker color and paint them individually. It's going to give it just a little bit of a different look, because I wanted to show you how you can use the same exact colors but paint it a little bit differently and get a different but similar result. So I'm going to turn on a little bit of music so you can enjoy the painting, and I'll catch up with you to finish up these cards. So after the painting was done, I brought over that inspiration once again, and you can see how close that color palette looks to the colors. I think it turned out really, really well. So for the actual greeting on each one of these cards, I'm using the Bold Stripes greeting stamps. I thought the rectangle, the really tall rectangle, and also that more square shape would look great on both of these cards. So I'm going to be stamping and heat embossing both of these greetings. I'll just go ahead and stamp them at the same time since I'm using the same ink and embossing powder for both greetings. So I stamped both, just walked my fingertips over each one of these stamps, and I did stamp them twice so that I would have a really solid line for my stamping. I then applied some of that same gilded embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. So this will match the gold lines on that Colette tile background. Tapped off the excess, and then I heat set these from underneath. Sometimes I find that I get a smoother embossed line, especially on very dainty greetings like this, if I heat from the underside of the greeting. So now I'm going to cut these out using a craft knife and a ruler. You could definitely use a paper trimmer for this, but I find that I have a little bit more control over how close I am to the lines if I do it in this fashion. So I just went around each one of these and cut them out individually so that I have a tiny bit of a margin on the outer edge of each one of these greetings. I think it's so fun to have two different shapes for these greetings, especially because the backgrounds are shaped a little bit differently on each card. So to finish off these cards, I put some foam tape on the back of the watercolor panels. And I like to use nice big strips of foam tape, and it really holds that watercolor plate paper in place. And it really cuts down on any of the warping or bubbling of the paper. Sometimes watercolor paper, after you've added lots of paint to it, it can be a little bit warped. But if you, for one, tape it down when you paint, let it dry completely, and then also apply it to or adhere it to your card using a thick foam tape. The foam tape tends to really hold on to that watercolor paper really well. So here are my two cards for today. I think they turned out super well, and I love the color palette that I chose and mixed those colors. You can see how each of these look a little bit different. Thanks so much for watching today. I'll be back on Sunday with a walkthrough of my August 2026 release. And then the next day, I'm gonna have a card video for you. I've been sharing some cards over Instagram, and there were a couple of cards in particular that I shared last Wednesday that in the comments, people said, I really hope you have a video for this card. Don't you worry, I got you, girl. I'm gonna share that video with you on Monday evening. I'm gonna set it to go live at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, but it is pre-recorded. See you then.